Hi, I'm Erin Meese,
And I'm Kristen Ireland.
and we're the co-founders of PeopleSpark Consulting.
Welcome to our podcast, The People Spark, helping ag leaders step out of the weeds with clarity and confidence.
We'll leave a little spark.
We'll leave a little spark. So, in our last episode, we started to talk about, I don't want to say middle managers, but managers and leaders who are kind of in the middle. Whether you have a board or a CEO, GM who's really starting to put the direction out to the organization and how you get the information you need as a leader to be able to transition that to your teams. To me, then that next step is like, oh, by the way, your direct reports are in that same position. So just like
Right.
you report to somebody else, whether it's a board, GM, CEO, and you're kind of waiting for information, your teams are in the same position. So how do you take that perspective that you just had and think about that in terms of your team? And what do you do as a leader to engage your teams, the people that report to you, either from an involvement perspective in talking about goals, direction, future, all of that, or a communication perspective, which I think is a fascinating perspective to think about. Oh, I'm in that boat. I forget that the people that report to me might also be in that boat. So, Erin, which of those two areas do you think we should tackle first?
I think probably going into maybe that communication first and understanding kind of what do our teams need before we can get into, okay, to what extent are they involved then in decision-making and in some of the activity?
So as you look at it in that way, I love that perspective, right? What she did there was begin with the end in mind, which is what do they need to be able to be successful, and how do we get there both from involvement to communication? I'm going to totally give you bonus points for that.
Nice.
That was nicely done.
Thank you.
Nicely played.
Thank you.
What defines that need? What do you think is the need of team members?
For team members? Well, I think part of that need is understanding, and I go back even to think about the commitment curve and even some of our change communication of what information do they need to have to help them to move forward. So what is happening? What is their role? How can we connect the dots between what they're doing in their day-to-day work to how we can make an impact on those things that we're saying are important? What does it mean? What does it not mean? And defining it from both of those sides. What would you add?
So where my head went, I would also give you bonus points for incorporating it back into change management, but then I feel like I've given away too many bonus points.
That's too many bonus points for one
liked
episode.
that though.
Thanks.
It might be. Not that you didn't earn them, because that was a really good connection. I was actually thinking about it in terms of the 8 factors of engagement. And I don't think we've talked about the 8 factors of engagement yet. I am going to
on one of our very first episodes.
Good. So I'm going to reflect back on those. So the 8 factors of engagement, and this is a test to see if I can remember. The 8 factors of engagement was actually talked about in a book called The 9 Lies About Work. And the authors, Marcus Buckingham and Ashley Goodall, conducted research on engagement surveys to determine what made highly engaged teams highly engaged. So they went back and looked at tens of thousands of engagement surveys and found that there were 8 things that were disproportionately present in highly engaged teams.
Right.
So essentially, highly engaged teams were more likely to say yes to these statements. I clearly understand what is expected of me. I get to use my strengths every day.
Yep.
In my role, I'm challenged to grow, and I know I will be recognized for excellent work.
Very good.
You can't see it, but I'm counting. That was 4 of the 8. My teammates have my back. I'm surrounded by people who share my values. I'm enthusiastic about the mission of my company. And I am confident in my company's future.
Nice work.
Okay.
That was all 8.
Do I?
You totally get bonus points.
Yes. So, but that's where I think about if that's what we need to have engaged employees, do employees
Mhm.
have enough information and involvement to feel like they can be enthusiastic about the mission of the company, to be confident in the company's future, to clearly understand what's expected of them, which totally goes back to your comment about alignment
Mhm.
of how our employees seeing how what they do every day impacts the business.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So I feel like we got to the same end coming from two different perspectives, which is why it's great to have a business partner. So you
Agreed.
get those different perspectives.
Did you know that contrary to what we might think, 96% of employees want feedback, whether it's constructive or recognition? Yet another survey found that only 5% of managers provide critical feedback to employees, even though it's important for their development. What's behind this? Nearly half of managers, 44%, find giving feedback stressful. Nearly a quarter, 21%, avoid giving it altogether. They feel it's uncomfortable, they don't want to demotivate employees, and just aren't sure how to do it. And the repercussions of not giving feedback end up impacting you and your business through lower productivity and profitability, decreased employee engagement, and increased employee turnover. I'm Erin Meese with PeopleSpark Consulting. For the last several years, we've built our business around supporting ag supervisors and managers develop their coaching and feedback skills. Why? Because leaders coaching their teams create more engaged teams. And these more engaged teams create the workplaces that bring more employees into the ag industry. Our leadership transformation program was designed to be straightforward and practical, providing content in digestible chunks, supporting participants through personalized feedback, and providing participants an environment to learn with other ag leaders across the industry. You might only have a couple of managers or supervisors, or you might have an entire team of them. PeopleSpark works with you to find the best solution, whether it's joining an open cohort with other ag leaders or having a customized experience that works across your locations. In order to provide the most customized experience for each of our participants, these cohorts have very limited number of seats available each month. If you're interested in more information around what might work best for you and your team, just click on the link in the show notes below or directly go to developagleaders.com.
I had a fascinating discussion with a business leader the other day who was talking about what success looked like for their organization. And new to role, brought a lot of excitement and passion. And I started to ask the questions like we brought up in the last episode about what does success look like for you? Where do you have the biggest impact? What area of the business that if you focused on more would have the biggest impact on your bottom line? What actions do you need to take? Where is the focus that you need to have? So I started to ask a lot of those questions. And as we got into it, we started to have this conversation about, well, at what point do you involve your team members?
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it as a continuum of you can engage your team members up front to say, okay,
Right.
here's the bigger picture goal. We have to define our goal first, because if we don't define the goal, we will be all over the place. We need to have some structure. Here is the end goal. Let's work together to find out how we get there. Or is it let me define it about halfway. Here's the goal. I'm going to define about halfway. You can fill in the rest. Or here is where we're going. Here's how we're going to get there. Let's talk about what this means for you. So where you could go from the extremes of no involvement to a lot of involvement or anywhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
What should you consider in that of how much involvement you should have your team involved in
Yeah.
when you're starting to talk about the future and where you're going?
This is going to be different for every organization because every organization is going to have different needs, different cultures, different histories. I
Mhm.
think one consideration to that point is what have we done in the past? I'm not saying that that defines the only way that we move forward. I am saying that when we try to do something so vastly different than what we've done before, it creates, remember, like that shock and denial part of the change curve. It creates quite a contrast to what has been done before. And it doesn't mean it
Mhm.
won't be successful. It means that it will create some friction within the organization that you'll have to navigate.
Mhm.
So part of it is understanding what you've done and to what level of involvement you've had before. Um, and I think that there's opportunity that I frequently will see leaders kind of hold on to things without asking input. So I see more of the inclination to hold things closer to my vest than I do an
Mhm.
inclination to bring everybody and their mother into the conversation.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I suspect that simply, again, I say simple, it doesn't mean it's easy, that by
Right.
finding areas where teams can be involved in those processes so that we are hearing from them can be really rich in helping to define that success so that
Mhm.
I know that I was part of helping to define that. So I
Mhm.
think about um, organizations who do this well are organizations who say, okay, when it comes to this, these are our non negotiables, right? This is not up for debate. We are saying these are the non negotiables, these are our values, these are the behaviors or our leadership expectations, or maybe just in general how the business is structured. Over here, this is an area where we know we are not the experts just at the leadership team. We know that you know the business. We know that you know our customers. And we want to be able to serve and accomplish these goals with the input that you have so that we can together be part of making this happen on its own. And so I think there's more likely an opportunity for us to open up and gather input somewhere in the middle of that continuum than
Mhm.
on either end. How do you see it?
I really liked your comment about it depends on what we've done in the past.
Hmm.
Because you're right, if we do something different, it can create a distraction from what we're trying to accomplish. And
Right.
again, to your point of it's not whether it's right or it's wrong, it's what's the level of distraction and how do we minimize that level of
That's a good
distraction. I
word.
think another part of that too is in so many cases with the businesses we've worked with, we've never asked people those questions.
Hmm.
So if we're trying to involve them, it's like going from 0 to 100.
Right.
And so what is the okay, let's not go 0 to 100. Let's go from 0 to 20 so that we're
Hmm.
stretching and we're putting them in a position where they feel like they can engage, use their strengths. The other thing I think is a consideration is openness to change or seeing things differently. That if the team is used to doing what we've historically always done, and as you start to stretch a team, that they may not see things that new way. And I think about that in terms of when you have long term teams that have worked doing similar things for many years, talk about loss and change curve, as we're talking about doing something differently, you can be rocking their world and not in a good way. That you're asking them to try something new that they may not be good at. You may be asking them to give up something that they were really good at, that they really enjoyed doing. And so I think there's that consideration. Again, it's not a right, wrong, good or bad. It's a consideration about how do you engage people. And I have to admit, I was an HR business partner working with a team that tended to be very tactical. It was a leadership team that tended to be very tactical. And I encouraged them to have a much more strategic meeting to tie to where they wanted to go in the business, like connect the dots between the strategy and the business and some of the plans that they already had put in place with
Hmm.
what I had anticipated was a very simple activity. And it was harder for people than I anticipated that it would be.
Yeah.
And then when we got to the end, they were like, oh, that was interesting. And then didn't connect it forward. So it was one of those, I put them in a position that they weren't ready to go. And if we're going to go there, there needs to be more structure, more discussion to support them to see those connections. And I had put them in a position where they weren't necessarily successful. What I also loved about what you said right there is putting together the non negotiables. This is where we're going.
Right.
Here are the guardrails. Here are the
Right.
ditches. These are that we're not going past this point because that doesn't align with our values or that doesn't align with where we're going to go. That I love having those non negotiables. And to me, that level of involvement can be determined by how long is that list of non negotiables. Because
Right.
you
Right.
may have a small number of non-negotiables, you may have a lot of non-negotiables. And then if people start to push those non-negotiables to be able to come back to say that, no, like that violates our value of this, or this is really important to us, we want to make sure that we do this, that defining those non-negotiable things is a great foundation to help define that.
Well, and I like what you were mentioning of kind of we're not trying to go from 0 to 100. We're trying to maybe go from 0 to 20 and start people down
Mhm.
that path. And if you are in an organization or if you're leading an organization where employee involvement has not always been a part of your planning process, the other thing that I have seen pop up is this sense of vulnerability. When I am asking somebody for their input, or if I'm asking somebody for their information that they know, because it creates this vulnerability of, why are you trying to get my information?
Mhm.
What are you is this somehow putting me at risk? Right? Because am I gonna lose my job? Like, this is something that I will hear and have heard and will continue to hear until the end of time, I'm sure. That because it is a change, it's a contrast to how we have asked and involved our employees before. And so being
Mhm.
able to share more about that why we're
Mhm.
asking them and what we're going to do with that information can be very helpful for them. The other piece that I cannot stress enough is how we respond as leaders when people participate will
Mm.
absolutely define whether or not people will continue to participate in the future. So, if we have just opened up the floodgates and we're asking for information and people are sharing stuff with us and it's all beautiful and we do nothing with it, or
Mhm.
we don't follow up and acknowledge that we've heard them, even if it's hey, liked your idea, we're not able to move forward with it because we don't have $10 million in capital that we can spend next year. Not having any follow up. I've unfortunately seen this in organizations when I was, before PeopleSpark, when I was HR business partner, where I would come in and you would come in after leadership teams or other previous leaders had not been good at that follow up, and how challenging it was to get people to participate the next time around. And it just is something that will compound over time. So recognizing and following up, again, even if it's a no, to let people know that it's been considered, that it's been acknowledged, is absolutely critical. Like I said, I cannot stress it enough.
Well, so when you said that, where my head went was not only how leaders respond after the meeting, it's how leaders respond in the meeting. That how
Absolutely.
many times do we ask for input and we're like, okay, somebody gives an idea and then we start to process it. I don't know, is that going to work? I don't know. And we start to analyze and judge that idea in the moment. And
Mhm.
with the best intent, we shut down future ideas. So I think as a leader, one of our coaches, Krista, is really good about using the words, what else? So as we're
Yep.
asking for people's ideas that we don't judge, we write down and then we say, what else? What else? What else? Because it's getting people into that pattern and routine of sharing. We can talk about how we're going to follow up with those later. It's how you respond in the moment will determine how they engage going forward.
Absolutely. Before we end our show, let me leave you with a question. What would it feel like to leave the office every day, not just knowing that your managers and supervisors had everything under control, but that you were confident that the direction they were giving your team members was creating and reinforcing the kind of great culture in your business that the entire community talked about? The kind of culture where customers went out of their way to work with you instead of the competition, because they were cared for, consistent, and kind. If that sounds like the ag business you've always wanted, stick with me for just another minute. Too many ag business owners and general managers, yes, even the big ones, find themselves stuck. They're juggling customer questions that their leaders should be able to handle, and somehow ending up as the bottleneck of decision-making in their own business. It feels like they can never get out of the day-to-day long enough to develop their talent, their business, and their own future. Sound familiar? You've worked hard to get where you are, but staying stuck here isn't sustainable. Not only that, it's costing you time, energy, and future growth. The good news? You don't have to figure this out all alone. That's why we offer you the opportunity to schedule a free culture development session. This no obligation, no pressure call is your chance to explore whether our programs are the right fit for you. Our programs have helped ag businesses across the U.S. like you to build great work teams and cultures, retain great employees, and develop plans for your business's success, all while freeing up more time for you. When you schedule your free culture development session, here's what you'll get. A personalized conversation with an expert advisor who's seen firsthand what it takes to break through barriers and achieve the culture and outcomes you're seeking. The opportunity to see how our programs can help you define your business and people strategies, and actionable insights tailored to your goals so you can start moving towards the business you've always envisioned. If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start building the ag business you deserve, here's what to do next. Visit this link in the show notes and book your free culture development session today. Don't wait. The next big breakthrough might be just one conversation away. Thanks for listening to today's episode.
I want to switch a little bit to talk about communication. So we were recently on a call with a business owner who was talking about communication to teams of, how do you know? How do you know what your teams know and what information that you should share? So, Erin, if there are business leaders who are saying, similar to the leader from the last episode, I'm not sure I could have been more clear about the direction and where we're going. I feel like I've been very clear about expectations. I'm tying it back to the 8 factors of engagement there. I've been very clear about expectations. How do they know? Are they making assumptions based on what they've said, or are they making assumptions because of where people are at? And if we don't know where they're at, how do you know?
I think a big way to help nip that in the bud is in having frequent coaching conversations with our team members. And when I say coaching conversations, I do not mean a sit down formal behind, like on either side of a desk or a table has to be overly formal. It could be a ride along. It could be a walk and talk as a coaching conversation. And I see those as opportunities to be asking employees those questions, right? What do you understand the goals to be, right? What's your priority for this week? How does that align with our goals? And just simply making it a normal part of our exercise keeps everybody understanding the path that we're on, right? It's, to me, so if you want to use sports analogies, it's no different than calling a play. It's no different than calling a timeout if you're in basketball and bringing everyone back together and making sure that they all know what they're doing. Everybody might already know the play. That coach is taking the time to write out and go through it with people in the moment to make sure they know the role that what they need to do when we get back out on the court. So I think sometimes we put all these big processes behind it when in reality it's those conversations in the moment, and it's just simply getting into that consistent practice of checking for understanding.
Well, and I like how you said that, for check for understanding. I think that's going to be my one thing for this episode.
I love it. Let's do it.
Is to ask. You listed off a number of questions to ask about, what is your upcoming priority? How does this align with the goals? I think even getting to questions of, how do you see your role impacting the business? What are the expectations of your role? How do you know you've been successful? What does success look like for your role? And in asking those questions, I would qualify this with a contrasting statement. So if you're not familiar with contrasting statements, check out our website. My intent is not to say that I'm not saying that you're defining your role. I'm saying I want to have the conversation to make sure that we're on the same page. So you're not saying that if you say that's what success looks like, that's what success looks like. My intent is to make sure that we're on the same page and see what they say of what success looks like and how they see their role impacting that bigger picture.
I love it.
And I
I'm gonna
think
go with
people
that
will
one.
be surprised. I think people will be surprised with the answers. I think people think that employees are making those connections more than they actually are.
Yeah. Excellent. There's room for growth. There's room for development here.
Mhm.
And right, this part of what I love of what we do in helping develop ag leaders is help make those connections so that the teams and the workforces that they are growing are solid. That these are the
Yes.
types of things that create a solid team. These are the types of things that create engaged teams. And when you
Mhm.
have engaged teams, those are the places that people want to work. And so
Yes.
it makes your processes like recruiting so much easier because you don't have to fight all the noise in the system because people know how
Mhm.
great it is when they're working with your team and with your organization.
Mhm.
So I think
And
that
you
is
don't
a
have to
great
recruit as much because
for
people
sure.
stay.
For sure. And I think that is a great place to leave today's episode. And I want to thank you for the time today and hope that there has been a couple of nuggets and that you try out the one thing that we have set up
Mhm.
for you today. Want to ask you to please like and subscribe this episode and welcome you to share your feedback, share your topics that you're interested in us covering. And with that, we will see you on the next episode. This has been the People Spark Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to bringing you more. The best way you can support us is by liking and subscribing this podcast, wherever you subscribe to your podcasts.
Thank you so much for hanging with us today. We are looking forward to continuing the conversations with all of you.